Okay, so you figured out that you need to replace your injectors in your Common Rail Cummins. Now, I made this sweet video of a time lapse of me taking this thing apart, but we just got these new Bull Power GoPro cameras, and I had the 5-second time lapse not on continuous, so it took 3 pictures. Every time I realized the camera's off and turned it back on again, I took a picture of the engine. Anyway, if you can't get to this part of the job, then you need to go back inside and watch The Real Housewives of whatever, and I'm sure you'll find your answer there. Just keep watching it. If you can get to this part, you can get to replacing the injectors. Now the only tricky part is these transfer tubes. Now this is your fitting that goes onto your common rail. This is the tube that transfers the fuel to your actual injector. Now, after you've pressure washed everything first off to make sure it's nice and clean, I think I got that on video. Taking your air horn off, your valve covers off, you can take these lines off. Now, we live in an awesome climate where this fitting is seized to the line. Now, I was able to get the line off of the rail. So what I did was I put a 15/16 wrench over top and grabbed the nut that holds the transfer tube in. Now there's a tool to pull these out. It's actually a crush fitting. Like this actually goes into the injector and crushes a little bit, and these do leak. So if you're doing your injectors, generally you can get a kit where you can buy them together. I'm replacing them. Now to get them out, you can just take this nut and spin it back, and it will hit the injector line and it'll pull it out partially. If it's still stuck, you can put a pair of vice grips right on there and just pry very gently and it'll pop out. You don't need to buy the tool. But now that it's out, I can just put a little bit of heat on there and just expand that and crack that loose. Like the lines aren't rotten, they're in good enough shape. It's just that this is seized on. So we'll unseize that. We'll take the injectors out, which is 2 bolts on either side. You don't have to go this far taking it apart, but we've got a bad oil leak at the back. So while we're at it, we'll replace both gaskets. We'll make sure that this is nice and clean. I don't recommend reusing the gasket. They're cheap enough, although you can if you want to under oil your truck. And we'll pull these injectors out, we'll clean everything, we'll put everything back, and we'll start taking video from here on in. There's just a couple torque settings you need to know to tighten these back up again to get the proper crush. And yeah, it is a very straightforward job. If you have a Cummins, you'll be happy that you're replacing 6 injectors instead of 8 on a Power Stroke or on a Duramax. And it is honestly about 1/3 of the labor, if that. So we'll take it from here. Here we go. So I'll use this one as an example. Keep that nut from spinning and then just back this nut all the way out. If you can't get your wrench on it, take the nut off of the common rail and then slide a wrench over. Use the box end on here and just open it all the way up until it you can't go any farther. And don't keep spinning it. You got to be careful you don't wreck the threads in the head here. But once you're that far, it's just a little bit of crud or whatever that's keeping the tube from coming out. So you can put a pair of vice grips on the nut and then just use a pry bar or a crow's foot, something just to give it that last little bit. See if I can do it with one hand to prove that it's not that difficult. Because I'm holding the camera and I'm trying to prove a point. It's the way it always goes. I'll try a crow's foot. Okay, I might have to put the camera down. Maybe a screwdriver. Hold on. No. Okay. So, of course, it's not going to go. But in theory, that'll work. Try it. All the other ones work, except, of course, the last one. Here we go. All I had to do was stick the screwdriver in there and just keep the vice grips from coming off, and then it came right out. So, I swear it works. It's just... I have the camera all set up on there. I don't want to take the time to remount this camera. Okay, so it's important to remember that you cannot get the injectors out if those if the cross tubes are still in there. So once those tubes are out, you should be able to just put a crow's foot right underneath the center of the injector and just pop them out. It should only be an O-ring holding it kind of in place. Make sure that the copper washer comes with it. On your new injectors, make sure you take the rubber cap off that goes in there. Don't jam it in the hole with that rubber cap on, or you'll probably be pulling your head off. So you can put a drop of oil in between the washer and the injector, and that'll keep the washer from falling off. And also put a little drop of oil, clean engine oil, on the O-ring there. Look, I'm doing it. Look, it's done. See, it doesn't fall off. Thought I was lying. And when you're dropping it in, make sure you line up that hole with the tubes on the intake. It's just common sense. The next step is important. Put your crossover tube in. Make sure that your detent is up and your O-ring has a little bit of engine oil on it. Your injector bolts can't be tight. I put them in, but they are loose. What that does is allows the injector to kind of move around to get your crossover in. Pop that in. You feel the spot. Just push in that O-ring. Feel the oil O-ring go in. Put a little bit of engine oil on it. Put this nut on and tighten that to finger tight. Then you can bring these bolts in to bottom out. Keep in mind that this bracket doesn't bottom out on the bottom here. It's just the tension of the bolts that keep it down. So you want to bring it down even so it's not rocking in there. Now once they're bottomed out, you can tighten this nut to 37 foot-pounds. Then go back and tighten these to 89 inch-pounds. And do that for all 6. Here we go. Okay, when you're ready to put the injector lines back on again, take your blowgun and just blow across the fittings. And what it does is create a Venturi effect, and the air going over top will pull anything that's on the top out and kind of plaster it all over your nice master cylinder there. So that's what you're aiming for. You can do that across the crossover tubes and across your common rail too. Okay, so once you have this clean, this gasket is a royal pain in the butt. The double lip goes down. It's like a double seal. But you basically have to start in the middle, and then as you're tucking the gaskets in on both sides, you got to shrink the gasket as much as you can. Otherwise, at the end, you get stuck with a whole loop. So start in the middle, and then push the gaskets towards the middle. It'll take you a while. Took me about 20 minutes actually. So not fun, but just that's the way you gotta do it. So do it.
Okay, assembly is just the exact opposite of disassembly. Hopefully you kept your parts in order, especially the injector lines. Don't take the hold down clamps off, just take the brackets off of the intake, and then it's easier to put them back to where they were. But hopefully you marked them so you don't confuse number 1 with number 4 and whatever else. 18 is your magic number for any bolt or nut that uses a 10 mil socket. So your valve cover, rocker supports, and rocker lever nuts are all 18s. We've got another video showing you the valve lash. The intake is 10, the exhaust is 24, but on these common rails there's a big allowance for that. I still try to keep it close. Once everything's put back together, it is self-priming, but you just have to make sure that your batteries are in good shape. So put a good charge on it and crank her over. As it cranks over nice and fast, it'll fire those injectors electronically, and Bob is your uncle. Take it down the road, make sure there's no leaks and no engine lights on, and you have a running 24 valve.
So, might as well review this 2005 Ram 2500 while we're at it. This has 392,000 kilometers on it, which is roughly 300,000 miles. It's got the Common Rail Cummins 5.9 in it, pre-emissions, and a much better engine than the VP44, the fuel injection system. More reliable. Yeah, the injectors go, but put a good fast system on here, or air dog, and you can prevent that from happening a lot sooner. As for the truck itself, not a big fan of these generations. It just seems cheap to me. I don't know, like stuff like this. I'm not a big fan of that. Cheap plastics. You can see my mirrors bouncing around. All sorts of little stuff like that. I got a big grumble underneath the seat coming from here somewhere. The steering wheel is crooked. Airbag light is on. It's kind of, this is another mechanic's truck, and granted, my truck has its own issues too because we just neglect our vehicles. But that being said, I probably wouldn't buy this generation of Dodge. Not a big fan of it, of this era. I would buy a Duramax. That was an LB LMM in the 25 and 3500 series trucks. I like the interiors better, I like the ride better, a lot less complicated of a suspension and steering system in the front there, and in my opinion more reliable. Just as expensive to fix when they do break, but that's my opinion, take it as you will. It's just, I love the engines, not a big fan of the trucks. So yeah, we're off to make sure that this oil leak is fixed, that the injectors is working properly, that no engine lights come on, and that it starts and stops when it's supposed to, and then do a service call at the same time. So kind of killed two birds with one stone. So here we go.
You're watching?
You're watching.
You're watching.
You're watching.
You guys are watching.
You're watching.
What? The Boss Garage.
Subscribe.